Hello, 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 beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the USL Show. Easy for me to say. There's a couple of new people who have joined the YouTube community and thus going to be in the chat because Twitter is down. So if you are somebody who's listening on a podcast player later and like, why did it not show up on Twitter? You have to have premium in order to stream on Twitter now, and so that's what happened. Before we get too far, I want to thank our wonderful, wonderful, wonderful patrons: John Hunt, Frank Anthony, Aaron J., Christopher Cohn, Harry Austin, John Fuller, Michael Fuchs, Joshua Duder, Noah Telfer, Roberto Aguilar, Jeremy Churchman, Stephen Howard, Rian Lacara, Tim Knox, NF Reg 30, Emma West, Kunal Patel. Thank you guys so much for supporting us. Your contributions are finally coming true this week with us finally going to Oakland. I feel like we've been saying it forever. For people who don't really care that we're going to Oakland, you'll probably be done hearing about it in about 2 weeks because next week, of course, we have to recap it all for you. Lots of fun content out for that. Saturday night, by the way, we are doing a live wraparound show. It's going to be Phil and I because John is red-eyeing in Phil and I will be doing just basically a talking show of talking about all the matches that are happening, breaking down the matches that already happened, looking at some film and kind of talking about goals and stuff like that. So it's going to be a ton of fun. We hope you enjoy it, plus some fun interviews along the way. Before I talk forever, Ryan, who on YouTube now is Wally. Ryan, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing well. They finally fixed my air conditioning last week, so it is not a balmy 81 degrees in my apartment. And yeah, I just figured out how you can get a profile picture for audio only. Audio only. So I wanted to put in a top 5 Pixar movie choice here.
Ooh, see, I feel like that's not even that controversial, but I was trying to think of all the Pixar movies, but I feel like that's pretty, actually,
I
top
think that's
five is pretty
accepted.
safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty safe one. Fair. John, how you doing, man?
Good. I like to think I'm the Eva to Ryan's Wally on the podcast. So happy to be here chatting about soccer this week.
He's going to get you a plant one day. Don't worry about it. Got a couple of fun news. First off, this episode, as always, is sponsored by goals.tv. It's free. Check it out. See all the content. We got fun stuff coming out on that later this week as well. But a new sponsor that we're super excited about is our sponsorship with Added Time Outfitters. And some people might be thinking, what is Added Time Outfitters? It is the cool bracelets that people have seen before. And I'm showing one on the screen right now that is Sacramento. It's just cool stuff. They're like $12. And if you use the code USL, like the USL show, USL, it can be capitalized or lowercase, I believe. You get 10% off, and that's your entire order. So if you want to go through and buy all of the wristbands, you get 10% off of everything, and it's anytime. So even if you bought some from them before, you can still get 10% off if you use the code USL at addedtimeoutfitters.com. Link is in the description. That's the fun stuff. I'm super excited about that. We have a kind of a jam-packed show for us tonight. Lots of stuff to talk about. Right now we have a little bit of League One action where Charlotte is deciding to do everything, scoring 2 goals, and now has a red card. And we are just 30 minutes in. So welcome to the Charlotte experience. We might give you updates on that if things decide to turn the other way for Chattanooga. But we have some Super League news that came out. Pittsburgh is alive and well, maybe. And then we're going to talk about Oakland because they were on the other side of the thrashing. And, of course, like I said, our trip out there, a little preview on that. And, hey, there's a team top of the table. Cue the meme, Gio. Someone has to do it. Union Omaha are at the top after a big win in Greenville, and some more conversations along the way. But let's go ahead and get into the Super League. And I want to start off this conversation with, and this is something I've kind of talked about before, we've talked about behind closed doors, and I'm throwing this into the ether. We feel like the Super League needs its own thing, and we want to cover it on the USL show. But, we do a lot of content here, and there's just only so much time. if you are someone who is going to spend a lot of time watching the Super League and you feel like you can talk in depth about it and talk about tactics, talk about storylines, please reach out to us. We want to have a standalone Super League show because this is Division One women's soccer in the U.S. and we want to have people who are talking about that and really that only. Um, we are primarily the championship pod, but we get into a little bit of League One, W League, League Two. You know this about us. And we'll talk about Super League on here, but we think the Super League deserves its own thing. So if you're interested in collaborating with us and bringing a new Super League show to the USL Show network, let us know. Reach out to us. But there was a fun little article that came out from The Athletic, and it comes from our always good friend, Jeff Reuter, friend of the pod, where they kind of break down why the USL Super League is not really trying to be NWSL. And this is kind of important because just yesterday we had Dan Vaughn breaking the news of like stuff happening in the women's soccer space of MLS trying to buy up entities and whatnot. And for USL to come out and just be like, we're not kind of competing, we are just different, we are a different thing, felt very timely and something we should definitely talk about.
Yeah, I mean, well, friend of the show, Jeff Reuter, and friend of the show, Amanda Vandervoort, really. But like that piece where she's kind of highlighting the fact that there are so many women and girls who are playing soccer at the youth levels, in the high school levels, working their way up the pipeline. And while the NWSL has done great work, she cites the fact that they've got 14 professional teams providing opportunities for American players. There needs to be more space for that. There needs to be a payoff at the end of the tunnel for these very talented athletes who come through the entire developmental system and don't really have enough of an ecosystem to support them professionally. And like establishing this player first mentality kind of as the driving impetus of the Super League, I think is a great way to position the league. And I think the references specifically to being very supportive of the possibility of a players union is exactly what you want to hear. You never want to see the league be adversarial to players. Starting a soccer war wouldn't be bad. Vandervoort and the Super League leadership is kind of avoiding all of those pitfalls, and it makes me feel bullish about the direction things are heading.
Yeah, just reading through the article, it seems like the leadership and focus of the league has the right idea in mind. Like John had mentioned, it sticks out to me that they point out that there were only 14 professional women's soccer teams in the country. And when you get down to it, that's just 356 players that you could have across the entire league. So even if all of those teams were able to have American players, it just limits the amount of opportunities you could have coming from high school into the college ranks and eventually into a professional game. And even mentioning in the article that unless you have more teams, you're going to be at risk of falling behind. And you're seeing that within this new era with Emma Hayes as the new manager of the women's national team, that it's really important that we can keep up the pace of the game here. And even then, the big thing that kind of stuck out to me was Amanda was reaching out to all of the first players being signed with each of the teams and just having a phone call and just echoing how excited those players were to be joining the league, how excited these players are to be playing for their hometowns, to be playing in these new markets. And it's just a really fun time for the league on the horizon.
Yeah, there's a couple of fun things in here. I think one thing that a lot of people really stuck out to them was this idea that that teams must field at least 20 players, right? That is one thing that is kind of cool. Like they have to do it. They have to go and field that many players, which means like, hey, people are going to get playing time. They kind of broke it down, and there was there was something interesting when they talk about the pipeline of only NWSL, and this kind of goes to whether they Super League went D1 or they went D2. This doesn't really change this fact of when you have what they say is 29,959 collegiate athletes in only 364 jobs, professional jobs in the U.S. there's a lot of untapped potential just in the United States. And the idea of not only do you have to have not only do you have to have your 18, you have to field 20 players, which means you have to have at least 20 players on your roster, likely more. And it's ensuring jobs for these women who earned it. Like there are so many good players that just go unnoticed because they weren't the like 0.001 that gets taken in the NWSL draft. Another thing, no draft in the Super League. Like it's an open market. Anybody can get anybody. And that's one thing to talk about. There is no salary cap. As long as you have your 20 players, you can pay the players whatever you want as long as it is above or is equal or above their minimum wage, which they say is going to be very comparable to the Super League, which makes sense because, and John, you're about to jump in. When we
that
talk,
was the exact point I wanted to make about they're making sure that there's a salary floor for each player so that they're making a wage that matters. Like that's giant, but yeah, continue.
Well, what I was going to say is when we talked to Betsy Howell 2 years ago now, she talked about how the Super League at the time was Division II was going to use the USL Championship CBA because they believe that equal division equals equal pay. And since they are going to be Division One, and if these minimum wages are truly comparable, then these Super League players are going to make more than the minimum wage that the championship players make, which makes sense because they're Division One. And the fact that the pay is, I guess, going to be equal in that sense is really cool. And that they are going to be paid accordingly. They are at a higher level than the USL Championship. They should be paid as such. And I love that they've taken that approach too.
Yeah, and in the discussion about the roster building, there was a real focus on giving opportunities to Americans who had gone overseas and Canadians who had gone overseas too, as we've seen, who wanted to be closer to home. Like, I think that's a very smart strategy to ingratiate yourself with the women's soccer community in North America while also fielding rosters that are really good and really competitive. So, I mean, we've been nothing but praiseful about the Super League, really, and this is just more of the same and for good reason.
And not just with the timing, not to be overlooked here, is that you will have the Premier League starting their season in August, but with the Super League on Peacock as well, starting their league at the exact same time, it's just a further opportunity to kind of just grow the eyeballs for people who are going to be watching this league.
Also, if you're someone who doesn't follow Amanda Vandervoort on Instagram, you definitely should because her stories are very entertaining. She's everywhere and anywhere, like all the time. And she's kind of doing this thing where she's going around every single club. I think she was at Detroit. Oh, I'm so sorry. DC Power. And she was there and talked to the players that were in training camp. And like, she was there for their like meetings and kind of had open dialogues. And there were pictures of her just kind of at training, seeing what was up. And she's going to be, it seems like she's going to be very hands-on and trying to get a feel of what it's like on the ground level, trying to keep her pulse on it, as opposed to what we usually think of these presidents. And for good reason, a lot of these commissioners, a lot of the presidents, they just always seem to be in the ivory tower and kind of get reports from the troops on the ground, basically. But she's making an effort to go into every single clubhouse and talk to players, talk to coaches, see what the conditions are like, and it's really cool to see.
100%.
So let's kind of pivot just a little bit and let's talk about Union Omaha, top of the table. They go into Greenville, and boy, do they get a massive win. Just honestly, Greenville looked like they had zero answer for what Union Omaha was doing as they walk out with a 1-0 win. Pretty fun. It was a fun match, and one thing that was cool was the post-match photo was all the Union Omaha fans that made the trip. And it's one of those fun things in the league that if you aren't very in tune, you would not think that why would a team in the Midwest in Nebraska have beef with just a random team in South Carolina. That doesn't seem like it makes sense. And yet there was a lot of people who made that trip, and it's fun to see rivalries very much alive in the USL, and big win for Union Omaha.
Yeah, this kind of felt like the statement win you've been waiting for one of the big three in League One to get. And I think Omaha did it in a way that shut down what Greenville does best. Like, this Triumph team has been pretty unmatched in terms of the attacking quality. So much of that drives through McKinnon and Zukowski. Omaha was willing to say, hey, we're going to play with our usual shape. We're going to be very aggressive. We're not going to give you an inch, and we're going to trust the process. And they went through and did it. I thought the back three, Malone, Mastrantonio, and Milanese, was completely unbelievable. Hardly put a foot wrong. You can fault the Triumph for being a little too cautious. I thought lineup-wise, not putting Sebastian Velasquez in there from the start was probably a misstep, trying to be too defensive, if I had to guess, and it ultimately bit them. But then going the other way, what you got from Dolabella, Lagos Kunga on air and transition opportunities where he was just ferocious on the dribble. It seemed like Omaha knew exactly what they wanted to do. And going into Greenville, not easy to execute a game plan no matter what on a somewhat smaller pitch. They did it with ease, really commanding victory, even though the 1-0 scoreline makes it look a little bit tighter. So massive ups to Omaha there.
And especially so, I do at least want to give a shout out to Phil, who was the only one who picked Omaha last week in our predictions to get that one right. But Omaha have now gone 6 matches in a row unbeaten against Greenville. And this is the first time since the early part of 2023 that Greenville has gone back-to-back games against USL 1 opposition where they have been shut out. And Omaha came in with a plan. They knew what to do, and they're now still back atop of the table for USL 1.
It's been a few weeks now since Greenville has moved away from their 3-man back line, right? But one thing that really stood out to me, and there was a lot of fans pointed out too, but midfield Pollock felt like a bizarre choice. And it really felt like, as you were saying, John, like they were very cautious. They were very defensive from the beginning. And as much as I love Tyler Pollock, and he's really a legend of the USL. Like, if you've been around since 2016, Pollock, but Father Time has not aged him to be a midfielder. There's a reason why he was, left or right center back in a 3-back system now, not like attacking midfielder like they tried to kind of roll him out to be. It felt like a scared choice, which is bizarre for a Greenville team who hasn't played scared all year long.
Yeah, and in terms of the deployment of Pollock, really no matter who was going at him for Omaha, whether it was Kunga, whether it was Isaac Bawa at the wingback spot, and you kind of saw 3 different wingbacks play over there over the course of the game, every single one of them had a real speed edge against Pollock in a way that hurt Greenville going in the other direction. And it also meant that you had McKinnon playing on the right, which he's capable of doing, but it's not where he's played at his best moments in 2024. And I understand you want to throw a curveball in a certain way. You don't want to just stick to the format when you're playing a team like Omaha, but it felt like it was a little bit too cute in a way that hurt them in the end.
We kind of mentioned Pedro Dolabella, and I thought the way that they used him was very interesting as well. This is something that totally doesn't matter, but I'm someone who is like number snob, right? Like whatever number you wear feels like it should matter. And when you see a number 9 playing that deep, it just feels like, okay, is there a reason why you're putting your striker back there? And that's not really how he was used, but he was really causing havoc in that midfield area, making those late runs and really putting pressure on this Greenville team, despite the fact that possession was not in Omaha's favor. And possession doesn't really mean anything besides how you decide to play the ball. But it felt like when Omaha did have the ball, they were really coming at them. And Dolabella was one of the primary reasons why it felt like they were able to put Greenville on the back foot every time they had possession.
You must have really hated Clint Dempsey wearing number 2 at Fulham.
I did not like it. It drove me nuts. Someone that really drove me. Someone that drove me crazy. Ryan James wearing the 7 as a fullback drove me insane. Wonderful human, horrible number. Why?
But I do think it should be at least shouted out for Dolabello, who I think through 14 games this year has contributed 12 goals to Omaha's attack this year across goals and assists for League One Cup and league play. So it's just been a focal point for their team.
Yeah, and the give and take he had with PC in that midfield where, I mean, PC, he's a name brand in the USL for many of the same reasons as Pollock. He's been around the block. He's got a reputation for being quite physical, quite passionate on the pitch. You've got him kind of sitting in as the number 6, and that liberates Dolabella to do what he does best in the midfield. Like you said, making those late runs, causing havoc around the area. I mean, the goal he got, kind of a scruffy play off a throw-in, but pretty much like on brand for why he kind of has that sixth sense, that instinct to come up with the big plays that win this team points.
I have this is something that totally doesn't matter, but I'm just going to ask anyway. How old do you think PC is?
He's only like 30, right?
Just turned 30.
That blows my mind. I mean, I remember this guy signing for the Fort Lauderdale Strikers in the NASL. That feels like a lifetime ago.
Follow up, Tyler Pollock. How old do you think he is?
He looks old. Like, it's the bald head and the beard. I'm going to say like 35.
32.
Okay, good for them. Ageless wonders.
Good for them. All right, let's kind of move on talking about several USL legends to some others, and let's talk about the beatdown that Pittsburgh finally broke through and put on Oakland Roots. Listen, Pittsburgh looked like they were coming. Hey, we had 2 weeks in a row of answering who's going to score goals for the Riverhounds, and as it turns out, Bob Lilly told us to shut our mouths that he had everybody that he ever needed. Because let's see, we got Junior Etu, we got Suber, and then Etu got, I think it was a brace, right? And then Mertz gets his penalty for the second goal of the game, and it was a 5-0 win. And Oakland kind of walks away with their tail between their legs because biggest loss in club history, I'm fairly certain. And Pittsburgh finally looks like they got a monkey off their back that just could not shake for this entire year.
No, and in many ways it was coming for Pittsburgh. Like, they weren't going to have the worst finishing luck in history for the entirety of the season. I do think that Oakland, barely got off the bus, so to speak. There were so many opportunities where Pittsburgh just got in behind. There wasn't any tracking from the midfield getting back. I thought Brian Tamakas had a mare of a game at right back. And that's a spot that's competitive now because of the way that Memo Diaz and Justin Rasmussen have held down the fullback spots, despite the fact that Tamakas is kind of one of the better players on the Salvadoran national team. He might get benched for his club, and for good reason. Both of those Etu chances, the penalty concession came down his side. And sure, you're hoping that Cedeno or Rodriguez is going to get back and try to kind of help him out. You got to do better in those one-on-one situations. And credit to Pittsburgh. I mean, the lineup choice from Bob Lilly was quite bold to bench Forbes and Griffin from the get-go. Ultimately, it gave them that sample Walty pivot, and it let Mertz finally get back into the center of the park and link play between the lines. That mattered a lot for them. But yeah, the finishing, the lineup choices, and a pretty flat performance from Oakland really made this one kind of the standout result of the weekend.
Yeah, I think this was a match that Pittsburgh sorely needed. I mean, they went 6 games in a row without finding the back of the net, an equivalent of an entire Godfather trilogy without scoring. And to come out with a performance of doing 5 goals and to put it past 5 goals against a very good Western Conference opponent is huge for them. This is their largest scoreline victory since September 2021. And Pittsburgh still remains kind of on the outside looking in for the playoff picture. But had they lost this match, I feel like you would still be looking at a team who is going to be further down the Eastern Conference table and kind of with a more distant hope at going into the playoffs. But I think my interest was going to be with how does Oakland kind of respond to this sort of match. I mean, Kaylor, you had mentioned it. It's their largest ever defeat in club history. And then when you're going into a Derby Day weekend against Sacramento on national TV, you really need a performance, and you certainly don't want to have a repeat of this moment.
So, you kind of talk about Forbes, and he ends up getting his goal. But the one player that I think I'm really interested in is going to be, oh my gosh, Danny Griffin. I lost it now, got it again.
Sure.
How do you don't leave him out of the team, right? And earlier this year, we saw Bob Lilly try to use Griffin as the center back who could bring the ball up and break lines later. Is there a world where a guy, and I don't want to just throw out a name, but I'm just trying to think of not necessarily a weak link necessarily, but someone like Griffin coming in for a Biasi. Could you see, because it feels like leaving Griffin out of the 11 feels like a mistake, despite when he leaves, suddenly they got this emphatic win, but leaving him off of the starting lineup feels forest through the trees a little bit.
And he wasn't in the squad either of the past 2 weeks. I don't think Pittsburgh is a team that puts out any injury reports. I would assume that someone like Danny Griffin is just injured because, that's crazy if not. But yeah, I mean, given how they're playing, given how connected and cohesive the midfield looks without him, Lilly is willing to put him in that central defensive spot, use him as a progressor, kind of let him step up into a diamond in possession if you need that to happen. I mean, Danny Griffin has to be on the field for Pittsburgh. He is so clearly, if not their best player in the conversation, he needs to be in that team. And I think he's shown the ability to be a central defender if he needs to. So that feels like the logical step if they keep finding this groove whenever Griffin is back ready to get on the field.
Also, Kenny Forbes getting a goal just kind of makes me happy. I thought we were going to go a year without it, and it really felt like it was going to be the end of, that whole thing. Nope. Listen, Forbes to Liverpool is still on the table. It can still happen. Take him over, win the Europa. Go on, Bob Lilly. For Oakland, we're going to talk about Oakland versus Sacramento at the very end. But, I kind of want to talk about them just a little bit more. You have 5 goals scored on you, but in all reality, you look at Neville Hackshaw and you look at Camden Riley, and weirdly enough, it almost felt like you couldn't blame them too much for a lot of the goals. And it's bizarre because you look at your center backs and you say, if we concede 5, it's your goalkeeper, your 2 center backs, and that's whose fault it is. But it really felt like those were the 3 that you couldn't really blame, other than taking out a right back and putting someone else in. Is there anything else to really try to get a result against Sacramento at home?
I mean, quietly, Paul Blanchett had a terrible game. There was the goal where he pretty much just was juggling in front of net and let the ball slip out.
Yeah.
And frankly, that's kind of been on trend. If you look at him amongst goalies with lots of starting minutes, he's one of the worst 5 goalkeepers by goals saved above expected. Contrarily, Tim Cyrell out of Project 510 has been pretty unreal when he's been in the squad. I'm not going to say there's a competition, but when you've got a big game coming, you've got a backup goalie who's shown an ability to impress. That could be a thing. I do wonder, lineup-wise, further ahead in the outfield, maybe you put Camden Riley in the pivot once again. That you've got Niall Logue. That Gagi Margvelashvili is going to be back at some point. Both of them are more than capable USL center backs that you can put next to Hackshaw and feel comfortable. I think Riley can be the stopgap you need, knowing the fact that Sacramento is really liable to punish you in the half spaces, really liable to hurt you in the places where Pittsburgh kind of exposed them the week prior. So those are probably the two changes I'd be looking at if I'm Gavin Clinton.
Yeah, I mean, coming into this game, it's a really baffling scoreline considering that Oakland were able to have a 1-0 victory against Louisville entering this match. But I think what's going to be crucial for the Roots coming up soon is that they don't let these results compound. If you look back through the entire club's history, on only 4 occasions have they conceded 3 goals or more in a match and then came back and won their very next match. Oftentimes, they wouldn't be able to pick up that result after conceding 3 goals immediately following. So they really can't let this spiral, especially with Sacramento being able to surpass them in the table if they get a result this weekend in Oakland.
Let's move on and let's go down to the Magic City, where Birmingham gets a 2-1 win over Colorado Springs. After going down early, they get 2 good goals, one at the end of the first half and one at the very end of the match. Really, I think John used the best word for it. Very chessy match, right? Where it just felt like just lots of little pieces being moved around to see what kind of eventually fits. And Tommy Stone ends up getting the last laugh with the Stefano Pino goal at the end.
Yeah, excited to get your take in a minute on it. But, I mean, Colorado Springs looked pretty rampant for the first 15, 20 minutes of the game. And they really made the bold call of Malik Foster is going to start this game on the bench. They looked no worse off for it. I thought the way that Fieldberg and Zandy were operating in that midfield specifically, very fluid, very flexible, finding space between the lines. We've also seen this growth from Ronaldo Damas, where he's a lot more willing to move around, a lot more willing to probe. He's somebody who I've been critical of in the past because he'll give you the goals in the box. He can poach over the top, but you've not seen that involvement in build. You've not seen those kind of supporting runs that open up space in behind for teammates. That's pretty much how it happened with the first concession, right? Like he's dropping a little deeper. Zach Zandy's going to get in behind. That creates a goal. And then the Legion, I mean, they stepped up their game. I suspect we're going to get some Jake Roof talk, but I thought he was incredible on the right side of the midfield there, or the right center, whatever you want to call it. But the Legion, they played their game. They worked the system. Kobe Hernandez Foster really stepped up as a passer in that second half. I do think Colorado Springs taking off Speedy Williams was a big deal just because what he does in the defensive midfield is so key to controlling the match. And it gave Birmingham the foothold they needed to do more useful things in possession, get into the area. And hey, Stefano Pino having an actual number 9 in the lineup pays off at the end. So really fascinating game back and forth. I think 2 teams that can come away with positives no matter what.
Yeah. One trend that stuck out to me with this game was that this is the 4th time this season that Colorado Springs have scored first and then ended up dropping points. They would be 9 points better off if they were able to convert any of their these matches that where they scored first into wins, and that would have put them atop the Western Conference and level on points with Louisville. So it's another one of those games that you're going to look back for the Switchbacks and say it might be the difference between being a top 2 or 3 seed in the Western Conference or being where they currently are in 5th.
To talk about the first goal, because I thought it was very interesting, John, you talk about it pretty well, of like Sandy's making the run, and you know Fieldberg has 2 choices, Sandy or Damas. And I'm not going to sit there and say that Fanwell Kavita and AJ Patterson were sitting there same like wavelength of they're never going to pass to Sandy. Like I understand that they are, you know, reacting to what they see in front of them. But what's not always seen on TV too much is that like Fieldberg does this like little like chest fake to open his body up to go to Damas. It gets a step out of Kavita, and that's the logical place to go. Who's probably getting the through ball? It's probably Damas. Everybody knows that. It creates just enough space. It goes through to Sandy, and I think you see where Trevor Spangenberg is playing his first minutes of the season. I think if he's played a little bit more matches, he reads that a half step quicker. He gets a save because it ends up being a very close finish. But Sandy with an incredible finish, if we're being honest. I think if you're also Legion, and there's a lot of stuff in the build-up that I think this ends up being a deserved result. but it's hard for me to get really, I guess, what's the word? Excited when both goals came from Christian Herrera dropping balls that should have been caught. Both of them, it looked like he was shocked that the ball made it to him. And I almost wonder if, especially on the second goal, because he looked stunned that it made it there, if somebody called for it or if he called away or something. And it just didn't happen because he looked stunned that it even got to him and kind of reacted, parried a good finish from Pino in the end. Jake Roof was my man of the match. I understand that Pino is going to get it. I understand that there's other players who have better stats, but Jake Roof was doing all the dirty work. He had a couple of crazy tackles in there that really won possession back, especially when he was also filling in spaces whenever Dodson would get up and go to cross the ball in. He would drop in just a little bit deeper and create either an outlet pass or stop the counter. And that was really fun to watch. He had a goal that almost went upper 90 that slammed off the woodwork, which there's no one I want to score more at this point now that Famuel Kavita scored than Jake Roof. So like it was just super fun to watch. You mentioned Kobe Hernandez Foster. You can tell that he played in the top league in Europe because he was going for a lot of passes that his teammates just weren't seeing. And you could tell he was getting frustrated because he would try something that I was like, yeah, if you're playing in the top flight of Norway, they probably see that and they're making that run and it's a goal. But they were just a half click behind and it just never happened. Second half, it looked like he kind of got more of the wits about him. And yeah, that was really fun to see. There was going to be one last thing that I'm not really remembering off. The Colorado, I've never really noticed it on film, but I noticed it in person, was their press, which they do not care too much about pressing the wings. And if it is someone in the back line, whether it be a fullback or a center back, they don't press them too much unless, of course, it's like Patterson or Dodson. When they're in the attacking third, they're obviously defending then. But if a central midfielder gets the ball, they were on them. Like it was instant. They would let Legion pass around the back and not do anything. They would just wait. But if the ball came to Kobe Hernandez Foster, if it came to Jake Roof, if it came to Enzo Martinez or Dawson McCartney, they were on them. Doesn't matter how far back, how close they were. It's like they were waiting for that central midfield to get the ball, and that's where they wanted to start that press. And it was multiple players, 3 players converging at once. It just felt like they got tired, honestly, and like they just could not catch up after that. It was really interesting to watch. If they can manage to do that more, I don't want to say tactfully, but if they can learn how to do that in waves, like 15-minute waves, I think they can get a lot of points off that alone because it was overwhelming at times.
In that game, I guess it was a month or so ago at this point, where they ended up giving up 3 goals against Las Vegas. It was very much the same story. But I mean, you started with the high press, but in that game, Chambers really wanted them to close down hard on the central defenders. They, for whatever reason, identified that as what you needed to stop for the Lights. You often saw the left winger not even care about being wide. He and the striker would just come up, go man to man against the center backs. It ultimately didn't work at all because they got tired and they gave up 3 goals. But just the fact that Chambers is like, hey, I'm going to mix up my attacking midfield pretty much every game. I'm going to kind of fine tune my press to whatever team we're facing that week. That's the sort of sophistication that's fun to see and is a little bit rare in this league. So yeah, shout out to Colorado Springs for being unique.
Yeah. All right.
Real quick, Taylor, I've got a random Birmingham question. How are you feeling about Miggy? Because I will say I came in with high expectations for the kid.
We did too. I think a lot of the issue is that he looks more like a left or right midfielder, but St. Louis wants him to be a central midfielder. He's a guy, if you want to think of a true number 8 that is a connector of the play, that is not going to make the line breaking pass, he doesn't seem to have the defensive prowess about him to be in a true double pivot. That said, I do think that this was one of his better matches that he had, because his press was aggressive and his tackling was pretty crisp, and his connection play along with the pressing, I felt like this was one of his better matches. But overall, he still looks like a 19-year-old. I understand that a lot of Legion fans will sit there and say, well, Rami Zamuda is a 16-year-old who's playing left back. And you had Matthew Corcoran, who's an 18-year-old, just turned 18, and he was starring the midfield. I think you're seeing the difference in teenagers. And it just turns out Miguel is your quote-unquote normal MLS midfielder, which means he can absolutely destroy me any day that he wanted, but just not quite the level of the players that are playing for the U.S. youth national team. I think that if he dropped down to League One, I think that would have been a better level for him, because I think he would have not necessarily starred, but I think it would have been closer to his talent level, and he would have been going against grown men, where I think it would have been more successful than him coming to a playoff contender in the USL Championship.
Yeah, it's just fascinating, like, given that the guy made 15 appearances for St. Louis proper in MLS last year, and to my eyes, and backed up by what you said, like, he clearly has the tools, but it's not really connected in the way you might expect. So, yeah, thanks for answering the random question there.
Yeah. Let's, as I pull it up, you did a tactics show on your club, Indy 11. So let's go ahead and talk about their defensive use, which is fun.
At using the wide center backs in their 3-5-2 shape to really do damage to the opposition. It's why they're in the Open Cup semifinals, and it's why they got a point against Loudoun United this weekend. You see the look here against Atlanta. That was a team that pressed in a front three, sort of like Indy, but the ability of those center backs to work around the edges and get the 11 into the final third made the first half a game in which Indy really took the fight to Atlanta United, an MLS competitor. Here you see Josh O'Brien and wingback Aiden Stanley working into the attacking half. But it starts with the fact that Callum Chapman-Page, the centermost central defender, can hit O'Brien around the edge. Similar story here, but you're working on the opposite side through Ben Ofemu. Ofemu, that right-sided center back, really is the most exciting, most daring player in the back line, someone with real passing range who, as you're seeing, can often get hockey assists, work into triples, and make sure that Indy is getting into attack. Now, in the Loudoun game, Indy came up against another team in really a 5-2-3 sort of shape, and they used that width in the back line to force Loudoun to step up and thereby open space in the midfield. You saw less of the daring runs, less of the daring passes, but because Indy was able to draw Loudoun up, they were able to get overloads in more important areas of the pitch. That's the story here. O'Brien starts as an initiator. He's going to end up hitting Stanley on the left. And because there are so many possible combinations in the center of the park, Indy is able to get in behind and tie up the game. This is the sort of intentionality and variety that the best teams have. And for Indy, uniquely, it starts with the back line. I do need to shout out the defensive quality as well. You're going to see all three players doing their job really excellently here from the Atlanta game. Particularly note Chapman-Page and Ofemu. When Chapman-Page steps up there to contest the shot, Ofemu ends up kind of filling in that central role as the play develops, and Atlanta is never really able to do what they need to do to penetrate. It's a very good sequence, and it's emblematic of why Indy 11 is so dangerous this season.
Floor is yours, John.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the cup set against Atlanta a little bit last week. I do think the Loudoun game was a stiff challenge, right? You're coming on short rest. You're using a pretty much unchanged lineup and relying on those guys to give it their all against one of the hottest teams in the entire USL. They stuck to the tenets, they did the job, and they got a point. Loudoun probably deserved 3 if you have to pick one or the other. But the 11 had the grit. They made the changes. They still relied on the ability, not for their defenders to drive offense, but for them to draw Loudoun out of shape enough to get that equalizing goal. And I mean, credit to Elliot Collier. That's an insane solo effort to get in for that goal. But still, it comes from the system. It comes from the Collier's decision-making. It's the sort of consistency and philosophy that makes a good team good. And it's why I think I'm trusting Indy to be a real contender when it's all said and done.
I think what's going to be really interesting is Indy 11 coming up this week against Tampa Bay at home. Those are two teams who are currently third and fourth in the Eastern Conference right now, with the winner very much putting a strong hold on a home playoff game. But very much credit to Loudoun United, who are riding a 7-match unbeaten run. It's currently their longest unbeaten run in club history, and it continues to grow. And I really think it's something that we've seen kind of turn a corner, even though Loudoun United is just 4 points above a playoff line. They currently have a better goal differential than everyone except the current top 3 of the Eastern Conference right now. And I think this is going to be a team that I would honestly expect to be in the postseason at this point. What will be rather fun is everyone's favorite Loudoun United fixture of the season is their summer camp game coming up next time out with an 11 a.m. kickoff against the defending Eastern Conference champions.
I love this kick. I love it so much. It's ridiculous.
They were advertising something, and it was like a water gun fight. It was something absolutely frivolous for these kids who are going to be at that game. And I just cannot wait for every aspect of this.
Why isn't the summer camp game their annual game against Las Vegas?
I like the fact that they're making Charleston play that. Charleston's been on national TV like 4 straight weeks, and then they get to play at 11 a.m. in Loudoun.
Listen, I'm just looking forward to the screaming kids. It's so exciting. One thing I have on the Indy, just kind of tactics talk, is it feels like Schultz is obviously GK1 at this point, and I think part of the reason you can trust your backline to make moves is because you're not afraid of a chance coming in on net. You can trust your backline to do something courageous, do something kind of wild. And like Benefemu, who we talked about, who made our all, USL show team, best 11, the reason you can trust him to be such a ball carrier is because if he gets caught out, you still have Schultz behind. And I think that's really important. And I think that's really transformed how this team really plays.
He was cooking to an unseen degree in that second half against Atlanta. Like, he was out of his mind good.
Before we get into some predictions, we do have our voicemail of the week. This is going to be the one that we got last week that we need to get on top of. This one's quite interesting, quite thought-provoking. It's been a conversation we've had before, but it's not Pittsburgh. We don't have to talk about Pittsburgh and strikers again, I promise. But it should be an interesting conversation. So let's get into this one, maybe. Okay, here we go.
Hey, nerds. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Not a controversial opinion by any means, but the USL corporate office needs to fix the way they allocate territories for Championship and League One. They need to allow overlap. They need to make territories in dense suburban and urban areas smaller, or they need to have those areas get smaller over time. If a team hasn't secured a territory in 10 years, they're not going to make it smaller. All right, that's it. See you tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I've never thought about the shrinking territory thing before, that kind of gradual fade out of, okay, you're going to have this protective bubble. We're going to protect you as you get up to speed, as you build the fan base. I frankly think that's a pretty good idea in terms of, listen, we don't want to throw 2 teams in Chattanooga within 3 years and just say, fight it out. Like, we're throwing you to the wolves, because that's just going to force competition. That's going to make everybody lose. Say you've had a team in New York, theoretically, say Brooklyn succeeds. 5 years from now, someone wants to come in and be like, okay, we're doing USL Championship Queens. It's a market that can support it. You've already given Brooklyn FC the time to get up to their capabilities, build in the fan base. I mean, I think the league office needs to be smart about who they're letting in and read these things situation by situation, market by market. But the territorial model is so restrictive. It kind of limits the potential of good investment groups that could be involved with the USL, could be raising the level, and aren't able to for kind of semi-monopolistic reasons.
Yeah, I mean, even if you just kind of look at the maps of the USL Championship, I think the two closest teams that you would have to each other would be the Sacramento, Oakland, Monterey Bay pairing, and then the Hartford, Rhode Island pairing. The league is fairly spread out, but there are just so many other markets that are capable of supporting and hosting teams. And I think the brilliant idea to try and just like gradually move away from having teams having that protective bubble for after like Andy had mentioned, after like a 6 or 10 year period, to really help a team kind of first get their feet on the ground, and then if they can't capture the market, open it up to a little bit more competition. I think to USL One's credit, you do see a lot of teams kind of in a similar foothold. It's not too far from Charlotte to Greenville to Knoxville to Chattanooga. And so there is at least some level of competition, but of course you can't mention Chattanooga without mentioning how the Red Wolves exist versus why Chattanooga FC is in MLS Next Pro. So I do think there needs to be a lot more, at least teams that are closer together, because then that also just breeds rivalries, but breeds derbies. It gets a lot more people kind of interested and involved. Like John, you had mentioned it, like New York as a metro area could honestly support like 6 different USL teams, one for each borough. And it really shouldn't just be down to the one team who plays on the boardwalk as the only team for a city of 20 million plus people.
Like, just to talk on that, it's going to take me an hour and a half to get to a Brooklyn FC game by train. Like, you could put a team elsewhere in the city that could draw people who feel a little bit put off by that on a week-to-week basis. Like, and you could come up with a million examples to that end. It's why there needs to be reconsideration of this.
In a perfect world, Madison Square Garden would be a soccer stadium and not first a concert venue for Billy Joel.
I mean, I think there's a lot of fun stuff in there to just kind of break down. I mean, in the end, I think the real answer is get rid of the territories. I kind of, if we are going to be in this monopoly and kind of, hey, let's get into political stuff and talk. Let me say something that I don't really fully understand, but I'm going to say it anyway. If we're doing capitalism, baby, only the strong survive. And if an owner wants to spend millions of dollars to misread the market and lose their money, that's their right, babe. Like, that is within their right to do so. If they want to go in on, a club that has a stadium 3 minutes by, 3 minutes by car away, that's on them. That is their choice. They should be able to do it. The only thing I think the league should do is say, hey, I just don't want you guys to know there are 30 USL championship teams and just 10 USL League One teams. So, like, obviously inflated, deflated numbers, but still, like the only thing I think they should really do is say, hey, why don't you try it in League One? Do a League One team, because we don't have a League One team in this market. Like, think about that. Consider that. Like, don't inflate this area that we're already in a league that's already overinflated. I kind of hate to say it on the fact of Loyal and RGV, but I feel like the championship league size is kind of perfect right now. And the fact that there are championship teams coming in next year, I'm kind of upset about it, because it feels really nice, feels really balanced, and it feels doable to watch on a weekend.
As somebody who tries to cover every game, like, anything more than what it is right now is kind of a scary proposition. I do think, just to circle back on the idea of the territories, and John in the comments makes the really good point, there is a logic to the fact that if you're in Chattanooga and you want a team to get TV eyeballs, to get a broadcasting deal, to get local sponsorships, to get fan support, these are all things that, yeah, in theory, if soccer is a growing sport, 2 teams could support. That's not really the case in a lot of cities in America right now. And I hope that if this were to be done away with, you would have ownership groups that are being considerate, not just flying in because they think there's opportunity, really trying to read the situation and say, okay, we've done the work, we've done the prep, we can make a case to the league to let us in, knowing that there is this alternative source of revenue, this alternative sense of community that we can build or else it feels like you're setting yourself up to fail in a lot of ways.
And as it's been said in the chat, just having more teams closer together, I think it's going to be a welcome thing for the league, just for just having closer away days. Like, a lot of the passion within the league are people who are able to travel to nearby opponents. And I'm sure the players would be fairly happy to have closer or bus trips or closer plane flights. If you look at USL League One, it's fairly sparsely populated and west of the Mississippi River, and they need more teams just out there just to have it make financially sense for the travel, but just there are more markets out there who could at least handle and have a lot more teams. So hopefully in the future, the league is looking into at least moving away from a territory model, or just being at least very deliberate on where they're going about some of their teams. Or alternatively, by 2060, we can have 8 USL teams, 1 for each Hawaiian island.
For Ben Clemens, who's eventually going to go back and listen to this, I hope you do, Ben, I have a proposition for you. Did you know that there's an Amtrak between Charleston and Cary, North Carolina? Could you imagine getting the entire team on an Amtrak and sending them from Charleston to Cary? The content.
Didn't the 76ers take Amtrak to New York when they played the Knicks or the Nets?
I have no idea, but I love that.
One of the teams did. I know that. I think you're right. I do think it was the 76ers. It was either that or Boston. One of the two.
That rules.
But, yeah, like, get all the guys on there, send them through, and have a blast. Just enjoy the good scenic. I think they would end up having to go through the Blue Ridge to get over there. I think that Amtrak goes like in a weird direction that before it goes to the coast. So, like, I don't know, let the boys see the sights.
Make it happen.
Support high-speed rail.
Yes.
Like that idea. Also, to kind of prove that point, we talked about it last week, Fire and Ice Derby. It's Central Valley versus Northern Colorado. Like, I mean, that's supposed to be the big rivalry. And that's a lot of states, man. I'm not too great at geography, but that's more than a 5-hour drive. And that's like most rivalries in the USL. That's too much. Like, we got to fill somehow, especially the Midwest. Give a little Midwest love, or like that area that's not really the Midwest, but it's not the West, that no one really knows what to call. You know what I mean?
The Great Plains. Don't ask me. By the way, if you're trying to drive from Central Valley Stadium to NoCos, that's a 17-hour drive because the West is gigantic. That's crazy. Yeah, Derby, come on.
But Fire and Ice sounds like the condom. Come on, it's funny.
Fair.
I mean, that's an equivalent derby of having someone from Portugal have to play someone in Finland.
Huge.
That is a great pull of mileage right there.
All right. Kind of want to hit a couple of topics before we hit the predictions. I said we were going to move on, but some fast. Tim Howard going to Houston to join the ownership. Just objectively hilarious.
It's crazy that Memphis, I mean, you bring in Caleb Patterson-Sewell, who, he's a former goalkeeper, sporting director now, doing a better job than the other former goalkeeper, sporting director. Let Tim Howard cook. I mean, if the guy wants to invest in the Dynamo, Godspeed. But it's everything about his post-playing career is just weird.
He's investing alongside James Harden.
Harden, yeah.
Except I feel like James Harden actually cares about his investment. I'm gonna be honest.
Harden kind of reps the Dynamo more often than you'd think, which is super cool.
When's the last time you saw Tim Howard rep a 901 shirt besides when he was getting scored on?
I don't think he knew he had that job for the last 2 years.
Like Stan Kroenke and owning Colorado Rapids.
Yeah.
Another Tim Howard team, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just bizarre. Also, the way I'm understanding, they were like, because some people were like, how did Tim Howard have $700 million? Valuations are not real in MLS. It's more or less of he bought a percentage of the share, and if you extrapolate that into what Forbes thinks that MLS teams are worth, he could sell it for $700 million. But in all reality, he did not buy in for anywhere close to that. If we're throwing out the idea that Tim Howard and Oprah are in the same tax bracket, absolutely not.
Yeah, that's preposterous if anyone thinks he has $700 million. Like, come on.
To be a minority owner?
Yeah.
If he bought in for $700 million, for him to be a minority owner, assuming the other owner has 100%, that would mean the club is what? Just above $1.4 billion? Am I doing math right?
At a minimum, yeah.
And if you look at just his career gross earnings adjusted for inflation, it's just a little under 19 million that he made across his entire playing career.
He went all in on GameStop.
He's living in the stadium now in Houston.
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right. Let's get into some predictions. Why don't we? First things first, let's talk about Birmingham, Rhode Island, national television, CBS Sports Network. They've been really hyping it up. National television. Well, this is true. But it's going to be a big match. A lot of former Birmingham people come back to Birmingham for the first time. Now, whether they're all healthy or not, that's another story. But if you are looking for the content, former friend of the pod, I think he's still a friend of the pod. I don't know why I said former, but he was on the show. Cano Smith, former Legion assistant coach, took with him as of recently Zach Harivo up there, J. Williams, Colin Smith, Gabriel Alves, and there was somebody else, and I'm forgetting about them now. Oh, no. Is that it? Is that 4? JJ, Zach, Gabriel Alves, Colin. Yeah, we got there.
You said it. You had it. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, now I remember. Plus Birmingham native Clay Holstad, who grew up 15 minutes from the Legion training ground. So, like, lots of homecomings, lots of reunions. And this one, Rhode Island, looks like they kind of figured it out, even though they started to kind of blow it against Miami, but also they were up 3-0 on Miami with 70 minutes into the match. That they just looked like they were like, lads, it's Miami. Meanwhile, like we said, Birmingham gets a big win. It's supposed to be a decent sized crowd if the Storms hold off. Who walks away with the points, if anyone? John.
Yeah, I mean, I have these teams splitting points in the end. Two teams that I kind of think are battling out in that like second tier. You're not quite going to get to home field advantage, but you feel like a pretty safe lock for a playoff spot. On the field, I don't know. I think Birmingham can be a bit mercurial. I'm interested to see how their pressing system adjusts against a Rhode Island team that's not afraid just to lump it over a press, kind of be physical, overload the half spaces, try to win those knockdowns further upfield. Really a pretty interesting clash of styles here. So going draw, but could see it going either way.
Yeah, I've went with the draw on this one as well. Since the last time Rhode Island has been shut out, they've scored 16 goals across 5 games, and shockingly, they still have a negative goal differential on the season with that. But I think despite the 5 games unbeaten that Rhode Island are on, it's still a very tough place to go into for Birmingham. So I have this one being a draw.
I'm taking Rhode Island. Honestly, I think that Rhode Island's going to score 2. The way that they've been doing this, like kind of counterattacking, bring on the pressure kind of game. I feel like the wing backs for Legion of AJ Patterson or Derek Dodson, one of them are going to get caught out trying to make something happen. And I think with what JJ has done in kind of hold up play and being able to play it to Dequa or whomever is making that run on the wings, I feel like they're going to be able to catch Legion out. I don't know if Legion has 2 goals in them in this game, especially if Rhode Island decides to pack the box. I think it's a 2-1 win to Rhode Island. Unfortunately, I would love to be wrong and every single Legion player tell me that I'm an idiot. Please do. Please prove me wrong. Next up, Indy versus Tampa Bay. We talked about Indy already, but Tampa Bay, they're here. And John, your tweet about Cal Jennings almost got you kicked off of Twitter, but it's fine. Who you got in this one?
I mean, Tampa Bay looked so controlled in that win over Orange County. Like, it was a very vintage Rowdy's performance in terms of Lewis Hilton controlling things almost behind the midfield line and forcing a defensive reaction. The way you're able to get into Jennings and Arteaga over the top, you got those late arrivals from the wingbacks to punctuate the attack. It felt pretty easy for them. That's not going to be the case in Indy. An Indy team that's a little bit more pragmatic, as we talked about, they know how to use their central defenders, know how to really force you back because of the threat they provide. I've got the 11 winning this one, and I think it's going to be a statement coming off of the Loudoun and Atlanta results saying, okay, we're back in action. We're going to get our form back together in the league. Really try to round it up as we head into the semifinal game and at the end of next month.
Yeah, I have Indy winning this one as well. Shockingly, they have not beaten Tampa Bay since September 2018, over 2,000 days ago. It was just around when the first Venom movie came out as the last time that had happened. And I feel like they kind of turn around that history and they really cement themselves as one of the best three teams in the Eastern Conference right now. So Indy 11 victory.
Let me that's crazy. I think that was Indy's first year in the USL. They were playing at Lucas Oil. That's psycho.
Yeah.
Elliot Collier scored in that game because time is a flat circle.
It always is. I am also going to take Indy. I just really love what they're doing, man. I think what they're doing in building up from the back, I think it's enough to catch. Like I said, I think it's going to be enough to catch Tampa Bay out. I think they might get pushed up a little far. And Tampa Bay, who's looked leaky at times in the back line, I feel like Indy can take advantage of that. Next
real
up,
quick, and going back to this, Guinzotti starting at striker for Tampa Bay in that game, and Juan Guerra, unused substitute on the Indy bench. Love to see it.
Golly. Let's go ahead and go to Jaeger. Let's talk a little bit about the Jaeger, and I'm not talking about the anime fridge from Central Valley Fuego. Let's go ahead and go Northern Colorado versus Omaha. We've already talked about Omaha today, but Northern Colorado, seriously, like Rendon has just showed up and was like, I don't stop scoring. I refuse to stop being the best player in the league. I'm just going to win games on my back, and the rest of the team's doing pretty well right now too. It's NoCo at home. Do you have Omaha winning it?
I do, because I think I'm starting to have some cracks in my belief in NoCo as of late. Now, the game against Knoxville was kind of an illusion because Northern Colorado did their thing. They had Rendon on the left in that game, and they pretty much took him the task until the tail end. They just couldn't get over the line. But that's 3 games without a win for NoCo against an Omaha side that feels like they've got serious momentum, just showed us that they can stop a team who has one very good scoring winger. It feels like Omaha's got the formula to get a result here. So, yeah, they're going to win.
Yeah, we are actually just over a year to the day since the last time Northern Colorado beat Omaha at home. They have beaten Omaha in the interim away, but I just think Omaha is going off the back of that really huge performance against Greenville from last week, that they're going to find a win in this one. 2/3 of the all-time meetings between these clubs have seen both teams to score, so this could be a rather high-scoring fixture, but Omaha wins and takes the table lead atop their group in the Jägermeister Cup.
I'm taking NoCo, and honestly, it comes down to the fact that it's at home. I think that these are going to be 2 teams that are going to be pretty even deadlock. It seems like a match that's going to go 1-1 into penalties, and it's hard for me not to give penalties to the home team. It just feels like just kind of how it goes. I think if it was in the league, if it was in League One, it would be a lock for a draw for me. But since it is Jägermeister, someone has to take the shot at glory, and I am going to go with Northern Colorado. Next up, we have Richmond versus Greenville. Richmond, who, again, we've kind of talked about it. They seem like they're figuring it out. It feels like things just look a little bit more holistic for the club. Meanwhile, we talk about Greenville. Frankly, like we said, played scared versus Omaha. Are they going to come out against Richmond and see this is a team who put blood in the water earlier this year, or are they going to see, well, Terzaghi out there and kind of do, a little bit more back foot Greenville?
This is my lock for the week. Like, Greenville's just not going to lose 3 straight games in all competitions. This is too good a team to do that, especially against a Richmond side that within 10 minutes of their last game against Chattanooga had given Rapapa Mensa a brace. Richmond doesn't have the connectivity. They don't quite have the shape nailed down. Getting some of their better players back has almost created this conundrum where they don't quite know what they want to do system-wise. So, I think the Triumph come away with a pretty resounding win. Wouldn't be surprised to see them kind of run up the goals. So, yeah, sorry, kickers, but Triumph taking it.
Yeah, I've picked Greenville in this one as well. You have Greenville still atop their group here, but if you look at this game at City Stadium, the Kickers haven't beaten Greenville at home since August 2020, just before Tenet was in theaters. But I still think I echo what John is going to say, that you just can't Greenville is not going to go down 3 games in a row here. And I think having the opportunity to put a 5-point gap on Richmond in their own table group for the Jägermeister Cup is just too good of an opportunity to pass up. So I have Greenville winning.
I'm also going Greenville. Honestly, part of it comes down to, and this is such a dumb reason, but if you haven't listened to the Triumph Liberty and the Pursuit of Happiness, Mark Ward Jr. on that podcast made me a hardcore believer in everything Greenville. He was also a Birmingham guy, so that helps. He was at UAB. So nice.
Yeah,
he's so nice, and he's the best. So I think a lot of that comes down to just me being bought into the hype, but it also just, there's no way Greenville comes out flat after being just manhandled by Omaha, right? It just feels like they're going to have to get some kind of redemption. So I am going to take Greenville. And last but not least, the CBS match of the week and the USL show match of the week, baby. We are going to be there pregame, postgame. We're going to be having some stuff at training and a lot of content coming out along the way. So check out this space. If you want to see all the stuff live, it'll go up on podcast players and other videos later. But you want to check it out live, go to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/the USL show to see all the live stuff. Can Oakland get it done at home? Can they repeat a 3-2 magic win where Sacramento started to claw it back, but too little too late? Sorry about it, Sacramento. You were dominated at home. Or does Sacramento repay the favor on the away fixture, much like they did versus Orange County earlier this year? Sorry, Andy King.
Yeah, I mean, such a fascinating matchup, right? The first game between these two teams started so strongly in the Roots' favor, and there was a strong recovery from Sacramento. But we're looking at a Sacramento team that has really not found their form since then, arguably. I think what was fascinating in the game against North Carolina that they played last weekend was that they were resting some players because they just came off the Open Cup match. But Jonathan Ricketts had an immense game at right wing back. And when push came to shove late in the match, Mark Briggs decided, I'm putting Ricketts on the left, I'm putting Gurr on the right, and they dominated possession. For the first time in a long while, they felt like they had a two-sided threat that really was asking questions. If they put Ricketts on the left, he's going to eat Tamakas alive unless the Roots have a response. I think a lot of this comes down to how bold does Briggs want to be? How free does he let this team play? Versus the adjustment that Glidden puts in to make sure that Oakland can get back to the form that had really pushed them high up the table. I've got this game ending in a draw, but I'm just so excited to see it in action, so excited to see what they come up with.
What's interesting for Sacramento entering this match for me is that this is the first time since the tail end of the 2022 season that they've gone just one win in 5 games in a row, which is just really unheard of for a very consistent Sacramento team that we're always used to seeing atop the Western Conference. When they came to Oakland at September 2023 last year, that was the first time they had ever won a match in Oakland, given how both these teams have shared a league for a while. That's just really intriguing. I have this game down as a draw as well, but I really think if I had to pick a winner, Sacramento, I think gets revenge for their earlier defeat from the year, but I have it as a draw.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm a pandering SOB, man. We're going to Oakland. It's in Oakland. It's about to be sold out. I believe in the Magic up the roots. Like, seriously though, in all reality, it's going to be a sold out crowd. And I think that wall of humans, and I know there's going to be a large contingency of Sacramento Republic fans, but that wall of humans, the hype that's going to come with it, just everything that the Roots are about of, what they do with the community, and the community loves them back. I understand that Sacramento's used to playing in front of 10, 11, 12,000 people and getting above 20,000 on if you play at the right stadium. Like, they do that stuff. This feels a little bit different. I also feel like, weirdly enough, getting your teeth kicked in 5-0 is easier to wash away and just say, fellas, we sucked. Let's not do that next week. And I feel like that's easier to wash away than a close loss. I'm taking Oakland. I'm fully in on the pandering. And also, I just believe. I'm believing in the Magic. Also, I was told that I might get mimosas that morning. So, like, I might be feeling the juice a little bit. I don't know.
Getting off the plane and immediately getting some mimosas. Let's go.
So that is all the predictions. Do we have any USL thoughts for the night?
I mean, just going to echo, like, turn on the CBS broadcast. Make sure you're tuning in before and after to what the USL show is putting down. It's going to be great. I can't believe I'm flying to California to do a live show. That's crazy. But yeah, I'm just super excited.
Yeah, safe travels to both you guys. I wish I was able to make it work with my work schedule, but definitely going to be tuning in here, and it's going to be a lot of fun for you guys.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So stoked. I think one USL, I guess, thought I have is this week is really just showing me how much a national audience can hype up clubs to promote things, because it's CBS Sports Network, right? It's not the biggest one. It's the network you put on at the bar when you're told to put on sports at the bar, but there's no sports on. And like, I'm seeing in Birmingham, they're like, come out. It's a national audience. They are hyping it up. And if your club has not gotten the CBS Sports Network or the CBS proper game at home yet, if and when they do, you're going to see a publicity push like nobody's business come out from your clubs, because while we see the numbers that come out that don't look huge compared to other ratings that come out, those are game-changing numbers for these clubs. So that one's pretty exciting. I haven't uttered the word electric in about 2 years. I've been real quiet since that video dropped, let me tell you.
Real quick on the national TV thing. When I was able to talk to some of the league officials when they announced the deal in the offseason, they've made that the goal. Every single team in League One in the championship is going to get a national TV game at some point this year, because they want the clubs to have that runway to hype things up in the community. Like, that's exactly what you want to see. So yeah, just love everything about Birmingham getting that platform tomorrow.
It's also just all the other clubs too that come along. Like, seriously, how many teams, and we talked about this, and I don't want to run too long and ramble, how many people discovered for the first time what Richmond is in the soccer sphere? Like, Richmond put on a show that they put on every single week. The red curve looks like that almost every single week, but there was probably a little extra juice, not only because of the rivalry, but they're like, oh, this is on national television. And there are people who watch it who are discovering, and man, that's the cool stuff. People are getting excited. And I think that this is the kind of stuff that really changes the outlook for clubs for long term. This is something that can really propel an extra year out of club, which unfortunately is kind of what you have to deal with in the lower leagues. So, final thoughts for the Knights. Let's go to Wally. Ryan.
Yeah, so they're doing a lot of construction around my neighborhood here in South Bend, and it's made me alter my route to work every morning, which just it really threw me for a loop this morning that the usual pathway that I typically take to the train station was blocked off. So I now had to like take a detour, and it just like it really kind of threw me off my game this morning. So that'll be a fun kind of month ahead of having to take new routes to the train station. But it passes by a Krispy Kreme every morning, which will be too tempting.
You know, there's always I saw a picture, like a meme of it earlier today, or maybe it was yesterday, but like there's something so refreshing about a new route home and stopping at a different gas station on the way home. So maybe this is a new way to spice up your life just a little bit.
True.
John, how about you, man?
Yeah, I've been binging a ton of Nick Cage movies lately just because that's fun. Went and saw his new one, which is called Longlegs. It's a horror movie. It's supposed to be like the scariest thing you've ever seen. Didn't really think it was, and I'm somebody who is scared at like the drop of a hat. But yeah, I just love kind of having an insane man in my life, just kind of kicking back and watching somebody be really weird for 2 hours at a chunk of time. I think that's fun.
Let me tell you, those scary. I don't do scary movies, but it's not even like I can really get scared. I just don't like that anxious feeling, man. That's not. I'm not about it.
Who needs it?
I mean, yeah. Kind of what we've been binging. We've gotten back into the Friends kick. We are just rewatching Friends. It's such an easy one just to put on and not think about. And there were jokes in there that I didn't remember that caught me off guard. Like the really quotable ones you kind of remember and you're like, haha, that was funny. But some of the pass by one-liners get me every time, and they're funnier than the big build-up jokes to me. Good stuff. Also, yeah, I'm just stoked to get out to Oakland. I am counting down the moment. Hey, if you want to support us, again, check out the Patreon, patreon.com/the USL show. Check out goals.tv. You won't regret it. If you regret it, you'll get your money back. It's free. Don't worry about it. And finally, go to addedtimeoutfitters.com and use code USL at checkout to get 10% off your entire order. It helps us. It helps them. A quality group. If you don't know much about Added Time, by the way, DJ Switzer is the one who kind of started it. And if you don't really know who he is, he was wrong side of the pond, who was a big face with FC Cincinnati when they were in the USL. And so it was a prominent USL figure that kind of started that company. And so it's just supporting the USL a little bit along the way. A lot of fun stuff there. I think Sacramento has a wristband. Louisville has a wristband. I think San Antonio. There's a lot of USL clubs. So check those out. But thank you all.
Are we still doing the scarves real quick?
Yeah, scarves pre-sale has already ended. So if you missed your chance, I'm pretty sure that we will do another run of them later this year. So if you want a scarf, watch for another one coming up towards the end of this year.
There we go. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. But thank you all so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. If you're someone who wants to be part of the live chat, go ahead and find us on YouTube or Twitch. We have one of those as well, the USL show. Join the live chat. It's a ton of fun. And thank you all so much for listening. And for the first and only time of night, here's Alan's voice.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show. The USL Show is now proudly part of the Protagonist podcast family. Please go to protagonistsoccer.com to check out more work. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see everyone again next time.